The sun had not yet risen in Gaza when Hamas fighters launched Operation Al-Aqsa Flood on Saturday, October 7th. By car, motorcycle, and on foot, dozens of Palestinian commandos advanced toward the Israeli border. They blinded surveillance cameras and Israeli defense systems and opened at least 7 breaches in the wall separating Israel from the Gaza Strip. Once in Israel, Hamas fighters simultaneously attacked at least 6 Israeli military bases and 7 civilian residential areas, including 1 town, 5 kibbutzim, and the site of the Supernova Music Festival. Le Monde has reconstructed Hamas's strategy on October 7th after analysing and verifying images from the day of the attack. Their strategy involved lightning raids, simultaneous assaults, and training. Between Palestine and Israel are 2 kinds of borders, a high-tech fence and a concrete wall. To cross the border gate, Hamas fighters had to disable its defense posts, which are towers topped with remotely operated machine guns. Of the 5 towers filmed by Hamas fighters, at least 4 were destroyed by an explosive device dropped from a drone. They continued using drones to target telecommunications infrastructure, like this radio tower near the Be'eri kibbutz. The aim was to blind the Israeli army as fast as possible. Elsewhere, Hamas fighters attacked the border more directly. By car, by bike, and by foot. They were able to break through the border using hand-laid explosives, like they did near the Be'eri kibbutz. A satellite image taken at the Erez checkpoint north of the Gaza Strip showed a breach in the concrete wall that separated it from Israel, as well as 2 partial destructions. Once the border had been opened, Hamas fighters quickly crossed it on all-terrain vehicles and on small motorcycles. Images analysed by Le Monde showed at least a dozen commando groups entering Israeli territory before the sun had fully risen. Less than an hour later, they launched simultaneous assaults on 6 military camps, 6 residential areas, and a festival site. At least 6 of the IDF's permanent military installations were attacked at the same time, between 6:30 a.m. and 8:30 a.m. At the Erez crossing, the Nahal Oz base, the base near the Be'eri kibbutz, the Sufa base, the Reem base, and a facility near the kibbutz Kerem Shalom, armed with grenades, rocket launchers, and automatic weapons, Hamas fighters entered the military sites. They killed and captured Israeli soldiers and filmed themselves triumphantly next to their bodies. At the Nahal Oz base, Hamas used a drone to drop explosives on groups of soldiers and tanks. Israeli soldiers were taken by surprise. At the Sufa base, images showed a lifeless soldier dressed only in his underwear, flak jacket, and helmet. His body lay in front of the door of a dormitory, where at least 4 other men appeared to be dead. One of them was still in his pajamas. IDF soldiers may also have been confused by some of the Hamas fighters' uniforms. They wore fatigues similar to those worn by the IDF. Even their helmets were topped with the same headgear as Israeli soldiers. Israeli troops were taken prisoner at the Erez crossing. In these images authenticated by Le Monde, at least 3 men in shorts and with bare feet were captured and beaten before being taken away by Hamas. As these military sites were being attacked, other Hamas commandos headed for 5 kibbutzim and an Israeli town, all within 7 kilometers of the Gaza border. It was at 6:55 a.m. at Beeri when the first Hamas fighters arrived on foot, going house by house. For almost 4 hours, the commandos massacred Israeli civilians. Filmed via CCTV, the first group can be seen collecting the belongings of the dead. Later, at 10:38 a.m, the same camera filmed another group of 2 fighters as they arrived at the scene in a white vehicle. They were armed and dressed as civilians. They loaded 2 lifeless civilians into their vehicle before disappearing from the frame. Three kilometers north, in the Nirim kibbutz, the militants filmed themselves advancing through civilian houses and firing through their windows. It was around 8:30 a.m. These attacks on civilians only stopped once Hamas fighters decided to leave the kibbutz, or once the IDF arrived on scene. Hamas militants likely trained to be able to carry out its operation. Training sessions were filmed and published across Hamas propaganda channels. One video showed Hamas militiamen practicing blowing up a border gate that was very similar to the one on the border with Israel. One video showed a soldier placing explosives on the dummy fence before setting it off. Another clip showed Hamas fighters, on motorbikes and on foot, crossing the partly destroyed barrier. These moments were recreated for real on Saturday, October 7th. Hamas fighters also trained to fly motorized paragliders, where the pilot is driven by a propeller motor in the back. They also put this into practice on October 7th. A map showing the Hamas fighters' route was found on the body of one of the group's attackers who was killed. Other small leaflets were also found on his body. They showed the IDF's different types of armoured vehicles and their strengths and weaknesses. They detailed how to target them depending on the weaponry available. Hamas claimed that nearly 50 sites were attacked by 1,200 of its fighters. Meanwhile, the IDF announced it has recovered the bodies of around 1,500 Hamas fighters on its territory. Israel says more than 1,400 Israeli civilians and soldiers have been killed since October 7th. Israel has relentlessly bombed the Gaza Strip in retaliation for Saturday's attack. According to Gaza's Hamas-run Health Ministry, as of October 24th, over 5,000 Palestinians have been killed.